If you're pursuing solutions journalism, which is expensive and time-consuming and ambitious, you might find that turns publishers off. You might take it to the crowd. I think this is a place where the audience and the journalist actually align. They want to read this stuff. The journalist wants to report it. My name is Sam Eifling. I'm a freelance journalist based in Toronto. I know there are probably a lot of freelancers in here, or students, or people who think you're going to go out and get a journalism job, but you will actually, I promise you, be a freelancer at some point. As a freelancer, what happens a lot of times, you get a great idea for a story and you don't have the money to report it. And this is something that is going to happen increasingly as budgets get slashed and there are giant holes in news coverage in areas around the world. I hope I can give you today a framework to think about the ways in which you as a journalist can think as one person, as an entrepreneurial entity, without having to think like a news organization. And if you're pursuing solutions journalism, which is expensive and time-consuming and ambitious, you might find that turns publishers off. You might take it to the crowd. I think this is a place where the audience and the journalist actually align. They want to read this stuff. The journalist wants to report it. So hopefully I can give you a framework for how to perhaps crowdfund or crowdsource a journalism project, and whether you should, because I guarantee you it's not for the faint of heart. So this is a map of Arkansas, where I'm from. This spot right in the center, just about Mayflower, is where my story starts. On March 29th of this year, a pipeline, an Exxon pipeline that runs from Illinois to Texas, burst in the afternoon and dumped some 200,000 gallons of diluted tar sands crude into this nice neighborhood you see here in this small town in central Arkansas. This was something, when I was in Toronto watching this, I just saw it as the news. It was a big national story, an international story, and it kind of flared up and went down. And that's when a friend of mine, an editor in Little Rock who I've done a lot of work for over the years, contacts me. He says, this story's not being covered right, and I want to bring somebody down, maybe for 2 months, just to hammer away at it. The trouble is, he's got no money to do that. And so we kind of talked about it. I had some other projects going on, and one of those was a radio pilot. I find out that the pilot doesn't get picked up, so I write him an email that says, "Hey, the pilot didn't get picked up. Good news, I'm fully unemployed. Let's tango." Right? So then we have to figure out, okay, we've got this great idea, we want to cover it, but we're broke. We don't have any money. It's a small paper, it's an alt weekly in Little Rock. They can't stretch past what they have already. So what do we do? The first thing I think is there's a grant that we could get, something called the Fund for Investigative Journalism in the States has been funding projects on an ad hoc basis for a long time. Their deadline was 4 days away. So we slammed together this grant proposal. That required us to do several useful things. One was come up with a very specific budget, decide what it was going to cost just at minimum to do this project and go report it. Second was foundations are like anyone else. They want to see that their money's being well spent. They want to know what other outlets perhaps are you going to partner with, or what avenues do you have to spread this story around? So it got us thinking in those terms. And it also got us, as we're sort of in a crowdfunding mode, we told the foundation that. We said, look, we have other skin in this game. We're going to raise money other ways. We're committed to doing this story, whether you give us money or not. This will just help us get to that goal. So we go to the crowd. We use this site, IOBY, which stands for In Our Backyard. It's an environmental project crowdfunding site. You can see the number we settled on was about $26,000. That started at about $7,000. But as we started thinking through ways in which we could partner with other media and expand this and leverage our resources, my editor reached out to the publisher of Inside Climate News, which is a scrappy, pretty awesome website. You guys should all know what it is. They are a small, merry band that managed to this year win the National Reporting Pulitzer Prize for covering a pipeline oil spill in Michigan in 2010. So they partnered with us as like the deeply sourced experts on the topic. We had the local expertise. We sold this to the audience as me coming in, as one of their reporters coming in, joining forces, sharing content. And while we were prepared to do the project for maybe $7,000 or $8,000, once we got them involved, we set our sights a little higher. They work a little more expensive than I do. And we came up with this number in the mid-20s. it turned out that pretty much as soon as we hit that goal, it works this way. There was the first third of it we got in about 6 days. The next third of it took about 20 days. And the last third took less than a day. Everything really snowballed at the end. And we found out that week that I got to Arkansas that we also got this other grant. So we managed to, out of thin air it seemed, pull $35,000 together in a matter of about 6 weeks. So here's what we did with it. We wrote a lot of blog posts. We're doing daily coverage. We're doing kind of like there were a lot of questions around what Exxon was doing, why the pipe had broken. There were a lot of regulatory questions, and we kept up with that on the blog. But I spent a lot of time, as soon as I got there, working with some people who had been near the spill but had not been evacuated because they were not in that neighborhood that you saw earlier. They were exposed to a lot of the toxins that came out of the pipe. This was the pithy quote: the oil went to the lake, the toxic fumes came to us. People breathed stuff, they weren't aware of the health risks. They stayed because they weren't told to leave, and they had long-reaching repercussions. This was pretty straightforward on-the-ground reporting. The other story we did, to go back to this map, was actually a stroke of genius, and it's one that anybody should copy if you're doing a pipeline story. It's just go to the places where the pipeline is. Nobody had done this. So you see, we took basically government documents and Google Maps, Google Earth, and traced the pipeline and just went to the places where it crossed. And we looked at watersheds, we looked at schools, we looked at living and playing and being around this place. And we just asked people, so if they turn this back on and it were to break, as we know now that it can, it's been running for 70 years, but now we know that this is a potential disaster, what would happen? What we found is that there were lots of places that could be affected, and in fact, a quarter of the state gets their drinking water from places this pipe goes through. So when you're talking about solutions and talking about solutions journalism, sometimes the solution is do nothing. And so far, that's what's happened. They have not turned the pipe back on. It's actually been a pretty big uproar in the state. These two stories were two of the biggest, most popular cover stories that the Arkansas Times had ever run. And it also pushed the story further, as we found, sort of to our delight and surprise. I'm going to play a clip from the Rachel Maddow show that aired in late August.
If you ask me, I think the Arkansas Times should be considered for a Pulitzer for their excellent and indispensable coverage of the Mayflower oil spill since it first happened in March and continuing now. This was their cover story earlier this month. It was titled The Forgotten, a 4,000-word reported piece about some of the victims of that Exxon spill, specifically about the people who didn't live in one of those couple of dozen homes that got evacuated after the pipeline erupted, but who still live right in the area around where the spill happened.
I watched that, and immediately I'm getting emails from people, and as sort of having this moment where I'm like, wow, that was pretty awesome. Rachel Maddow reads our paper. But what to me that did, I think, is it answered a question that is really difficult to approach when you're trying to crowdfund, which is, what do you offer people? We're giving this away. You didn't get a shirt. You didn't get any kind of extra credit. You don't get a copy of our album. You get to read the same free paper, and you get to go online and read the story as anyone else would. So I think in this case, what we sort of stumbled into as we did this on the fly was a way to show people that they were invested in something that was making a difference, even if it's just to get the word out, even if it's just to get the shout out on national cable. So think in these terms. If you're looking for a story, if you're trying to decide whether a project would even suit this kind of approach, where you are asking people to pay you money for something that they could get for free, which is a ridiculous errand if you think about it. Look for something that has a passion close to them. What we were surprised to find is that in raising that money, the $27,000 or whatever we got from the crowd, most of it, after all we did, after reaching out to the network of Inside Climate News, came from Arkansas, which is a small state and it's a poor state. They accounted for the majority of the funds because it was a local story. So look for stuff that has a local audience and appeal to those people. Don't just throw it out. You have to sort of justify your existence on this. We started looking at reasons why people gave. Another thing that I think helped us was we have a natural problem, and in this case, almost a villain in Exxon. We didn't go into this to just kneecap Exxon, but I think people could read between the lines of muckraking and like what might be the issues behind, say, a pipeline spill, and assume that we were going to be hard on Exxon, which I think we were. There was a friend of mine who, when he donated, posted on my Facebook wall and said, My $25, I think, will go toward an hour of making angry calls to Exxon. I'm fine with that. So I think if you have an adversary, may be too strong a word, but if there is a foil to your project, to your solution, that people can rally with you, I think that's helpful. And the last one was, and something also to sort of keep in mind as you decide what might be a good project or how to make your appeal. There was someone told Lindsay something that really stuck with him, which was they gave and they said, you know what, I'm really glad I did that because it made me feel like I was doing something and not just getting angry. And it's something to keep in mind that there are democratic processes and entry points for democracy that some of them are very nebulous. And a natural disaster, an environmental disaster is one of those. There's no direct action for an oil spill. You're not going to put it back. You're not going to vote it out of office. It happened. And so rather than for people just to, throw an empty beer can at the TV and say, what just happened? You give people an avenue. You say, look, we can't fix this necessarily, but we can start to work on it. And I think in some cases, if you've got the stomach for it, you may find that the audience will help you actually do your work. Thank you very much.